Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Now I've been busy on my sewing machine making these Christmas wall hangings. They're mini quilts. They're about 12 by 12 inches. And I've done it with postage stamp patchwork. I've made two. One is quilted on the machine and the other is quilted by hand. And then they've been hand finished. Would you like to come with me and see what I did and how I made them? Come with me into the kitchen and I'll show you how I did it. This design takes 30 1.5 inch squares, and you can see I've got a selection of Christmas fabrics, and I've got a mixture of dark, medium and light colours. Some have got directional prints, and I'll make sure I get those in the right orientation. And then a good mix of greens, reds and lights in between. I'm going to use a red turned over from my bark and a tartan for my tree base. It's worth working out your design beforehand. You can see the design is staggered, so it's like a brick pattern going up the tree. A kitchen table, and I'm sewing on my Singer heavy duty machine. Now I've got the Sylko 36 weight thread in pine needle green, I call it, in the top and in the bobbin. I've got a normal presser foot on, and I've got my stitch length set at 2. Now I have a 1/4 inch seam guide here. For this postage stamp stitching I want a seam width of 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go very tight, and I'm going to use my little guide, which is this magnetic guide, and go halfway. The trunk, I've just sewn down a seam, and I'm going to turn it inside out and then press it flat. Get to the machine one row at a time. Now as we sew this, we're going to change the orientation, and I made a short video on postage stamp quilting or sewing a few months ago, and I recommend that you go back and view that. To take the first 2 pieces and sew them together, right sides together, down this right edge. Turn the seam back and finger press open, and I'm going to finger press open to finger press alternate rows. This row I'm going to go to the right, the next row I'll go to the left. That will help them nest together easily. Now let's do the same as we go along the row and just keep repeating it. Doing a back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then cutting close to the stitch line. You don't want this to come apart. I'll press those seams, and I'm going to sew in rows from the bottom up, and it's important that you find the mid-centre point, and I recommend that you use pins for this, particularly when we're looking to centre these blocks to the centre here. By the time you get to the machine, it's easy to misplace where your blocks need to go, and again I recommend that you take them in rows. I've placed it on a piece of square cotton, and I've pinned it in the central position, and I'm going to applique round those currently raw edges. I'm going to leave those as raw edges. Applique those raw edges, again same thread and 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, leaving the raw edges as a feature of this design. For quilting it, I've got the same white cotton backing, and I've got a thin soft feel polyester wadding cut larger than the cotton size. A tree isn't a tree without a star, and I've used this metallic cotton thread just to create a star shape at the top of the tree. I'm going to use it just on the first layer to create some interest on the white background. Now I'm just quilting using a single strand of green cotton thread, just doing a running stitch along the rows so that it looks like this on the back. And I'm just using a short running stitch. And I just make sure that I bury my knots and my ends so that they don't show on the back. Right, so this is how it looks from the front. And then on the back, I've got just short running stitches going across. So I'm going to continue the quilting across the back. And I'm going to use a white cotton thread this time. Just a white cotton thread. And I'm going to pick up from here to the edge. And I'm going to try and do straight stitches. Mark the line. I can either use an erasable ink pen or mark it temporarily with a ruler, an Aran needle point, or with a bone folder. Anything that just creates a temporary crease so that my line is straight. My second one, I've sewn my tree in the same way, but it's not yet attached to the cotton. I've made the sandwich in the same way, 2 layers of cotton with wadding in between, and I've just pinned the tree on. This way, as I sew, I'm going to quilt as I go to sew the tree on, and the stitch lines will show on the reverse. I want to avoid bunching while I sew this, so I'm going to do this like I sew my large quilts, from the middle and then sew outwards, and that way any rooking of the fabric will ease out the further out I go. So I'm going to start in the middle and I'm going to work and stitch just to the side. Let's get that in focus. And I'm going to stitch just to the side of the stitch line and then work my way up and then across. Leaving the raw edges as a feature of this design. A reverse stitch at the beginning and the end will allow you to snip very close to that stitch line. Change my thread to white in the top and in the bobbin, and I'm now going to stitch from the Christmas tree outwards, following a straight line along from the green stitch line I've just done. Now for this you could use a marking tool, an erasable ink pen. I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to get as straight as I can. You might need to fold it over in the throat of your machine. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Part of the beauty of it being handmade is it's wonky. My lines are wonky. They look equidistant. My tree goes a bit to the right. So does my Christmas tree in my lounge. Doesn't matter. If I wanted it perfect, I'd have made it shop bought. That's not what crafting and quilting was all about, is it? To square it up and cut the edges, I've taken my ruler down the 6.5 inch line down the central line and then cut that edge. I'm going to turn it over and do the same this edge. I need to make sure I've got cotton on the back the same as on the front, and I'll check that because it might not be the same. Squared it up and I've now made it 12 by 13 1/4. Remember, I need space at the top for a star, and I'm going to add binding around the edge to bind this little quilt the same way I do with my normal quilts, and that's with bias binding in this bright red. And I'm going to change my thread again. This is a Scarlet Sylko. What's the colour number? The colour number is 44. I'm going to call this Santa's coat. Sewing 1/4 inch away from the raw edge, and I'm going to sew to 1/4 inch away from this bottom edge and do a mitered corner. To do that, I'm going to lift the needle and turn the fabric 90 degrees. I'm now going to take this edge up against that top raw edge and fold it so it lies flat. Placed a crease in the underlying fabric at 45 degrees to the corner. When I start to sew again, I'm going to put my needle back in where my artery forceps sit and then start sewing along the line across the bottom. I'm going to do all 4 corners the same way. That's the last of the machine stitching. The rest of it will be completed by hand with some gold threads, and then I'll turn over this binding and finish it by hand on the reverse. I turn the binding over and finish it by hand with a slip stitch so that it's not visible on the front. Oh, this is the final wall hanging. I've hung it over my door where I normally hang my advent calendar. This one is the one that's completed and quilted on the machine, as you can see. I've attached a satin ribbon at the 2 tops, and on the back it looks like this. And I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. I'll show you the other one that was hand quilted too. Now, these will last for many decades, and I hope that they become treasured possessions brought out each year, and each year that they bring them out that they think of me, and that they become family heirlooms. I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me. This is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter. Come back and join me again soon for more crafting, won't you? Bye.